Hey guys, it's Alana.
And Jonah.
And welcome back for another episode of
Seeing Other People.
Jonah, how are you?
I am doing excellent in Brooklyn. The usual. Let's see. I wanted to share something about my personal life with you. I'm trying to think.
Chill. Let's have drinks first. Get to know each other a little bit.
Trying to think what that is. Oh God, something in my personal life. Well, on work life, I'm still waiting to hear back from a certain film festival about the movie. We might hear back this week or next week. But getting
you were also going to hear back like a month ago and 3 weeks ago and 2 weeks ago. So
yeah, well, we didn't get into the one that I wanted to hear back from a month ago, and then there is one that we still are waiting on that we might get. Hopefully, knock on wood, get into. It'd be really nice. That's my professional life. Just been writing, turned in a new draft of a script, which I'm excited about. It's kind of loosely based on our lives, actually. What you know about that, and then. Dating life wise, I sent you a couple interesting screenshots last night where I canceled a date and then I was like, am I being stupid or mean? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I know exactly. I was just waiting for you to say more before cutting in.
No, I basically sent you a message where I had to cancel on somebody twice.
You guys don't ask me for advice for once.
I did. And there's a little bit of pushback, a little bit of attitude from this person.
Because rightfully so, though, because it was rightfully so and not rightfully so.
My mom needed help moving. She just moved to New York City during a pandemic. And then there was a fucking snowstorm.
Yes. So here's the scoop is that Jonah canceled a date twice in a row. So, however, with good reason both times. But as someone who that's happened to, you do get a little is he making up excuses? You guys haven't met yet. You don't know each other. So she doesn't.
Well, yes, we've met. We've gone on 2 or 3 dates.
Oh.
That wasn't a first date.
Ooh.
Oh, shit. Is your advice to me now changing that I should actually
push back?
Oh, wow. You think I should?
No.
Because your advice at the time was don't judge her for this. She's just sort of being someone who's a little upset by this, let down. And I said, okay. So then we made plans to see each other this weekend.
She's probably just bummed out. She's probably bummed out. I'm sure once you see each other, it will be okay. And here's the thing, you could say something in person yo, my excuses were say something in person. Legit. I wasn't trying to piss you off or actually cancel on you for no good reason. Your excuses were very legit.
There weren't excuses. They were more important things that had to happen. And I don't know, bro. It's anytime someone cancels on me and they have a relative excuse reason, something important, I never, ever, ever guilt them in any way. And guilt can come in the form of short text answers.
Yeah.
Saying fine.
Yeah.
It's a fucking game. Oh God, now I'm getting upset by it. Anyway.
Remember when our intro was going to be 3 minutes? We just spent 3 minutes.
I know, sorry, but I think it's good content.
It is good content. It's important. It's important.
Update us on your life, Alana.
My life. Let's see. I am 2 dates in with someone, which is exciting. That hasn't happened in a while.
Nice.
So we'll see how that goes. And yeah, I'm really busy. I'm so busy right now, which is good. But it doesn't stop me from getting anxious when I don't get a text back for a while.
Yeah, you were texting me for some advice, to which you then posted a screenshot of me yelling at you for not taking.
You were yelling at me.
Well, yeah, because you were playing, just to call you out in the podcast.
No, I was not playing a game.
Alana, you said he needs to text me, otherwise he won't be able to see me. That's his problem.
That's not. That is okay. Hold on. I have the screenshots. I have the receipts.
Okay, let's go read this. Let's go read this. You want to read the screenshots?
I can't because I can pull it up on my computer. Yeah, hold up.
Okay.
All right.
Just so quick context here. Originally, I had given Alana advice because she was waiting for someone to text her, and then we agreed that we would wait till Monday to have him reach out because she had done a lot of reaching out, and then he, of course, reached out with something cute and fun, inside joke over the weekend. So that was eliminated. And then I was like, when are you going to see each other again? She was like, well, I asked him out last time, so now I'm waiting for him to ask me out. And then she followed up by saying, but if he doesn't.
Hold on. Okay, I have it. I go, waiting for him to pop. You go, when is next date? I said, don't know yet. We're texting, waiting for him to pop the queue. He's going away next weekend, so I'm assuming he'll ask to do something this week. You go, I'll act like you didn't say the word assume, and I'll also act like you listen to our podcast.
Yes.
And He goes, I go, ha, ha, ha. And he goes, ask the fucker out. I go, I did for the second date. He goes, what the hell is wrong with you? Ask again. I go, I'm being attacked. And you go, yeah, dude. Don't call me dude, bro. Rightfully attacked. I go, so I couldn't text him first until Monday, but I'm allowed to ask him out on every date. I don't get your species. Here's the thing. I have no problem asking. I have no problem asking a guy out. I have no problem with it. I have no problem texting first, but it was like, I wanted to, after the second date, like I wanted to hear from him because I wanted to know that he was still interested in seeing
Alana, me. Keep reading. You're cutting off the text. I'm going to take over now because you're going to not give me enough context here. So basically you said, I don't get your species, which by the way, doesn't make any sense because those two things are different correlated conversations. My advice to you earlier was not to text him because you had done a lot of texting. We were trying to see if he wants to see you again. So he would text you before Monday because you were worried that he wasn't going to text you again. That was my advice there. Then in the context of now trying to plan a new date, you said, I scheduled the last one, so I'm going to wait for him to schedule. And I go, now scroll down all the way. I go, I'm trying to help you. You go, ha, 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 I'm laughing. Sorry, I was posting a story of this conversation. Look at Alana's smile right now because she knows I'm fucking right. Okay, if he doesn't do it by end of day, I will. This is talking, do it by end of day, referring to planning a new date. I mean, it's not a crazy schedule. I possibly could Tuesday if that's his only option, but then blank for a personal project. Then you have someone's birthday on Wednesday. And then you go, his fault for not asking me sooner. We could have been hanging out tonight. I'm not anxious.
I was joking.
Yeah, but his fault for not asking me out sooner is exactly why you just, that is the point. Look at your smile. You know I'm fucking right. That's why you reach out and say, hey, I have a busy schedule this week. I would love to see you. These are the days I can hang out.
You're so right. It should be easy. And no, okay, fuck off. I know it should be easy. It should be simple.
But I just think it's funny that you read this when you're trying to make your point, you read the wrong messages because you know I'm fucking right. All right. Anyway.
We could do an entire episode reading the, wow. Should we just record another episode right now?
Okay, everyone, I want to give a quick shout out to our first official sponsor of Seeing Other People. And Alana, we waited a long time to bring on a sponsor because I think we really wanted to have it be a product that we truly love, use, and can encourage everyone listening to try. And of course, we wanted the founders and the company to be people that we relate to and resonate with. So John and Renee are the founders of Mindset Wellness Cbd, which is a CBD gummy. They make tons of products, by the way. They make, skin serum and bath soaps. And one of the ones that we really love are these gummies. I particularly love the Rest gummies, which have melatonin with the CBD. And I straight up can't fall asleep anymore at night without these things. And they're not addictive. They're really good. They're vegan. They're all natural. But I really love, after a stressful day of trying to navigate Hollywood and a dating life of being horribly painfully single, these are the perfect thing. The CBD calms you down. The Rest melatonin helps you go to sleep. We actually got you guys 10% off and free shipping if you use code Seeing Other People. They taste amazing. They're vegan, and they're gluten-free for all you, and organic, non-GMO. But they do an amazing job. And I seriously, and I mean this, like, try them and use our code, make an order. I promise you're going to want to keep ordering them and support a really awesome business from a happily married couple that works together and loves each other. Okay, and now we're in the episode. Francesca Beauman, how nice to see you all the way over on the other side of the world.
Thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Thrilled to have you.
Thrilled to have you. Again, I was complimenting you before we started recording on your office. I do want to paint a small picture for our audience. You called it a study. You called it a study, first of all, so I want to make sure.
Right, I call it a study. What do you call it?
Office?
Office to me seems like in like a corporate building, not in a home. I don't know.
Oh,
fair. That is a very good point. I like study. Study
but
sounds
maybe
nice.
That's a British thing. I don't know.
We have this awesome wallpaper, very calming blue. You have this really what looks like a cool wooden desk over to the side. It's just a great vibe. I mean, it's a writer's
If you're listening,
dream.
I highly suggest you head on over to YouTube, maybe watch, hang out with us.
Let's jump in. Francesca, tell us about Matrimony Inc. and perhaps, what inspired you to write a book about the history of dating?
So Matrimony Inc., it's my new book. It just came out, and it's about the history of personal ads in America, but broadly the history of dating in America. Because look, I've always been interested in personal ads. You know, when you used to see them in the back of the newspaper, like back in the day, and they're always kind of fascinating. I started looking into them, and I found out that they went back so much further than anyone realized, right? And as a historian by trade, I knew there was going to be a lot of interesting stories there. So like even, you know, one evening I found a personal ad going as far back as 1759 that no one knew existed. And when I found that, I was like, boy, there is a whole world out there of stories to be told about how people fell in love, how people formed families, you know, really how the nation was built on personal ads in many ways.
And just for our audience, how do you describe a personal ad? What is a personal ad?
Right, that's a good question. So initially, a personal ad would be an ad in a newspaper and magazine. And what's interesting is it means you get the first personal ads when you get the first newspapers and magazines. So in Britain, that was in 1695. And in America, that was in the 1720s. And it's like, right, any new technology, what's fascinating to me is whatever the technology, one of the first uses for it is building relationships, which is basically a fancy way of like, getting more sex. Okay. So whether it was the first newspapers or magazines, or whether it was the first websites, people always straight away are about building relationships. And so in America, once Benjamin Franklin and the like are launching newspapers in the 1720s, within milliseconds, by which I mean months, you'd get the first personal ads. And I found them, as early as 1759 in Boston. You start getting them in New York City in the 1770s. And what happened was, as soon as those populations, the populations of those cities hit a certain amount, so say around 20,000 people, 30,000 people, 40,000 people, which to us these days, of course, doesn't seem very many, but back in the 18th century was a lot. As soon as the populations hit that amount, and you can't just marry the girl next door or the boy from church, then people needed, a little bit of help with matchmaking. And that's when personal ads began. They were ads that would say, husband wanted or wife wanted, and they'd be in a newspaper, often on the front page, funnily enough, because they were such a source of entertainment to those people who would read them. And they'd get reprinted every day. They'd be a certain number of words. And then all through the 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century, you would find them in newspapers and magazines, of course, until around the 1960s, when you get the first computer dating sites, as they were called. And then today with dating apps. So they've sort of evolved through, but they're all just different forms of advertising for love.
So question for you, I'm so fascinated by all of this, when they were personal ads in newspapers and magazines through from 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, did they change at all? Or was it basically the same amount of information? How did they evolve while still being in print? Right.
So they evolved hugely. So the first personal ad in America was in Boston in 1759, and it was from a young gentleman. He was looking for a lady who was between 18 and 23, of brown hair, good stature, and excellent morals.
I've already aged out.
That sounds like that's exactly what I'm looking for that as well. So that's
there you go.
Legitimately, nothing has changed. Okay, continue. Sorry.
No, legitimately nothing has changed. So I was going to say the same point, Jonah. So, a young lady between 18 and 25 of middling stature, brown hair, and good morals. Really what he's saying is young, respectable, and rich, right? But in 18th century language. And that's kind of, what a lot of people are looking for today. Young, respectable, rich. Or, you can redefine what rich means. It might mean resources or, a lot of Instagram followers. But, essentially, it comes to the same point in terms of human mate choice. Anyway, so that's just to, give one example. That's America's first personal ad. Broadly speaking, as the ads, developed through the 18th century, appearances were not deemed that important. The language used in the personal ads would be something like well-looking or medium build or healthy, particularly pertaining to women. And that was a euphemism really for fertile, right? Because healthy meant fertile. It meant able to bear me, my son and heir. They would be very open and robust about the economics of marriage. So very open, it would be a bold call today to say outright on Tinder, must have loads of money. But in the 18th century, they would use phrases like, must be successful in business, or, I know.
Must be successful in business is
right.
Excellent.
Right. Well, I have a better one.
On my Hinge profile?
You should put it on it. No, this is what you should put on your Hinge profile. So New York City's first personal ad was in 1788. And it was from a man looking for a woman. And his only criteria, were that she was under 40, not deformed, and in possession of at least £1,000.
Oh my God.
I know.
I'm in.
There you go. Under 40, not deformed, and in possession of at least £1,000. So that is a little different to what you get today,
not
right?
deformed.
Well, also, so I mean, first question is: are the people who are in search of others writing using this language, or is there someone who existed as a middle person, like basically someone who wrote this for you, or is it the words out of their mouth? Do we know?
We don't know. I think it's the words out their mouth, because in the beginning, again, the language used tends to be quite different. It's only as you get in the 19th century and really the 20th century that you get far more uniformity of language. You get a kind of a style that everyone kind of accepts and knows and understands.
So, and you mentioned the thing of like money. Like, it's funny. I've seen on Tinder people be like credit score of at least 700, like something like that, right? Where it's like a credit score checker has a 401k, or like you see other ways of measuring finances where it's like has a top sheet on their bed, which is like I think a subtle way of being like has a job kind of thing.
Right.
But this is just so interesting. So I imagine for you, what was the process like? You were just, when you made that first discovery, were you just turning after turning like, oh my God, look at this discovery?
I was so thrilled, because again, as a historian these days, it can be quite tricky to, discover a story that hasn't been told before. And not only hasn't been told before, but that there's so much evidence of, and it's evidence of people's innermost needs and desires. It's these incredibly intimate stories that are being told in these ads of, women desperate to get married, or men who have lost their first wife, or, there are so many stories in these ads, as I would find hundreds and thousands of them through the 18th and 19th century. Also in every state in the nation. That was what was interesting. They weren't confined to New York and Boston and Philadelphia. They spread and spread until I would find them in the tiniest local newspapers in Kansas and Wisconsin and all over. And so again, that's such a human insight into what men are looking for in a woman and women looking for in a man, and how that's changed. And so that, to me as a historian, was obviously incredibly exciting. It was a lot of trawling through newspapers, though.
I was going to say, is gender, are there more men than women writing these things, or vice versa, or was it fairly equal?
No, so interesting.
Yeah.
One would assume that there were hardly any women placing them, especially in the 18th and 19th century, when, the cliches is that women were just sitting at home waiting for a man to turn up. But actually, I found far more from women than you would think. They would have the headline, husband wanted, right?
Well, I feel like there was so much pressure on women at that point to just get married and have children.
Exactly.
So I feel like it was like all they could do if no one showed up.
But that pressure is, I think, I'm curious, Francesca, your findings, were women at that point like the ones who were like courting guys in a way? Like, isn't it men being like, I have to find a wife and someone who can like take care of the kids? Like, isn't that the mentality back then?
So broadly, yes, but then you do get these instances of women far more often than you think who have obviously decided to kind of seize control of their destiny and do something about it, right? Rather than just sit there and wait for a man to turn up. They're like, right, you know what? And that, so it took the kind of only the most bold, brave women to do it.
Wow.
Which is why sometimes, particularly their earliest personal ads, do have a slightly eccentric air. So one of my favorite early personal ads from a woman was in a local newspaper in Wisconsin in 1853. And it says, husband wanted, in like big, black, rather alarming type. And she says she's looking for a man who, she says, I want no brainless dandy nor foppish fool, but a practical man who can hoe the garden and rock the cradle.
Wow.
So, she uses this very kind of eccentric language.
I'm just writing down the time code, because that's a great clip that we're gonna have to use.
Okay, wait. I have two questions. One, Jonah, and Francesca, should we put a personal ad for me like in the New York Times and
yes.
see if this works?
Right. Well, the New York Times is a perfect place to put one because they had them from the 1850s. And you know what? They don't even know they had them. So the New York Times in 2001 put out this press release being like, we're going to start having personal ads. And I was like, no, you had hundreds and thousands from the 1850s onwards that they didn't even know about.
Wow.
So you could, but the thing is, Alana, then you get a certain type of person responding, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what you're looking for, right?
It's true. Well, that audience actually might be better for Jonah.
That's true. I mean, but I don't know who's looking for a friend. Like, I don't know who's looking for in a personal ad. And Francesca, I was going to ask you, and this might be jumping ahead, but what is the modern version, to Alana's point and request, of having a personal ad sent out about her? What is the modern version of a personal ad, in your opinion? Is it an Instagram grid? Is it a Twitter feed? Is it?
No, I think it's a profile on one of the mainstream dating apps.
Interesting.
Really. Obviously, there are huge differences, not only therefore in what you're putting out there, but also, the kind of person who is coming to you, and that, has changed significantly from personal ads through to dating apps. What's interesting to me is how the medium in which you're advertising for love can then affect like who you end up with, right? Because so in the old days, you place a personal ad and it was charged by the word. So you had to be very succinct in terms of what you're looking for in a man or a woman. Obviously, these days, people have a really long list of like, he's got to be like this and this and this and this, and she's got to be like this and this and this. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Who can say? But it's definitely shifted human mate choice.
Well, it's also interesting because sometimes on dating apps, as we've discovered, people say what they don't want. I'm not looking for someone who voted this way or who's, who has a picture with a fish. And it doesn't sound like that's common with the personal ads. I mean, did you ever see any ads that's like, I don't want this? Or is it always what they're looking for? Because it's seeking. It's like, I guess my point is with the dating app stuff, it's a little bit of a two-way street, and you go on the dating app to find somebody. On these personal ads, it kind of feels like more like a walking advertisement where it's like, I am openly manifesting and looking to welcome this into my life, which is why I say Instagram in a weird way, where it's like,
right.
But I mean,
so I think you're absolutely right about how in the early days, people would often describe themselves more than talk about what they were looking for. And if they did talk about what they were looking for, there were certain tropes that turn up a lot. So particularly in the 19th century, women would say must be sober, because there was a big problem with sobriety. Say in Philadelphia in the 1860s, the men there drank 3 times more alcohol on average than they do today. So, that was an issue.
Wait, what? That's
crazy.
That's a
so
stat.
Everyone was just like drunk all the time. So they'd be like, must be sober. It would be very specific criteria. It does mean that from reading all these personal ads and like tracing them through to dating apps, I don't know what you think, but my conclusion when people say, so, what's your advice about dating? From reading all these ads, I would say it's be really open-minded, because you never know who you're going to fall in love with. So to have a long list of like, he must vote this way and his photograph mustn't be with a fish or this or whatever. You don't know until you meet that person. And it's kind of a cliche, but it is true that you never know who you're going to fall in love with. You might surprise yourself.
100%. So question for you. Obviously, we're talking a lot about like men looking for women and women looking for men. At what point in the history of personal ads did people start seeking like publicly like same-sex marriages or couples?
Right. So what's tricky about that question and frustrated me throughout my research is, of course, because it was illegal to be gay until really relatively recently, you had to use euphemisms in your personal ads throughout the 19th century and, right up until the 1960s, right? It was illegal. So you couldn't openly advertise for a same-sex partner. It meant that in Britain, when I would find these ads, I could kind of decode the euphemisms. They would say things like, man looking, they'd be all the cliches. We would laugh at the cliches today. They would say things like, man looking for companion must like Oscar Wilde, Byron, and theatre. Every sort of ridiculous cliche, right?
Yeah.
But with the American personal ads, I found it a bit harder to decode. I know they're there, but for another project, what I would love to do is work with a linguist, somebody who's an expert in the history of language, to work together to find those very early ads, because I found it difficult to kind of read between the lines until they became much more open, with some of these early magazines in the 1960s in like San Francisco, when you got the first gay ads, and then the first lesbian ads kind of about a decade later in the 1970s. But certainly, as I say, they had to go under the radar, so they were harder to track down.
Once you like, I guess my question is, do people sign off with their names? And then I forget, we realized it and asked us, all right, let's say you find someone on the other end. You're like, this sort of person is I am meant for them. They're my soulmate. What do you do next? Is there a number you call, or do you show up to the post office? Like,
do you send a phone number
in the 1700s?
Do you show up to a saloon?
Yeah, slide into their DMs.
Yeah. What happens next?
Okay, so at the end of all these early personal ads, it'll say, please write to. So you'd write a letter to either the newspaper office, or there'd be a PO box number.
Oh my God.
It would say all letters to be addressed to this particular. So for example, New York's first personal ad in 1788, you were asked to send letters to the newspaper office, which was in Peck Slip. So I like to imagine like women going down there on the cobbled streets, like darting amongst the kind of crates of fish and leaving their letter. So you would write a letter, or sometimes to a coffee house. That was a popular place as well. And then you'd exchange letters for weeks or months. What is amazing about that is, of course, then if you did decide to get married, one of you would have to jump on a stagecoach on a train, travel 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles to marry someone you'd never met before.
Meet for the first time. Yeah.
I know. Crazy. I mean, that is mind-blowing, right?
That's mind-blowing. But I guess you can get that intimacy of like writing letters. I was going to say, did you ever track someone where it's like you discovered a personal ad, and then you somehow found the vows section or the wedding section? Were you able to link like the setup and the payoff in a way?
But I totally was.
Wow.
The thing is, it tended to be
the chills. I love this
totally
so much.
Chills. Right. The only thing is, it tended to be when things went badly, because the problem is when you're tracking couples in the early days who met, through the newspapers or magazines, if they lived happily ever after, they tended not to talk about it, right, in the 18th and 19th century, because there was a little bit of stigma attached. So you might not know. It was only when things ended very, very badly that then you would find out, because it would be, a story. So if you ended up in court because of bigamy, fraud, or even murder, that's when you know about it. So it gives you a bit of a skewed view, because every time you read about these couples in the paper, it's like, she was murdered, he stole all her money, she had been married 7 times before. And that's obviously not a fair picture at all, but it's all you read about. So I have lots of couples who met that way. A few happy. So one of my favorite stories is one of, she's called Augusta Larsen, and she lived in Chicago in the 1860s as a Swedish immigrant. She answered a letter in the newspaper from a pioneer farmer in Washington State. They married, they, were kind of the founders of Washington State in many ways, and again, helped kind of build the nation. So I have a few of those. I have a lot of stories of people who got murdered because of a personal ad, I'm afraid, but they are not representative, let me hasten to add.
Wow, that is just... I imagine as you're discovering these things too, you're kind of just having these eureka moments where it's
every day
in your little in the office there, and it's like, it's like a national treasure.
Not the office, the study.
Right, the study.
I watched National Treasure the other day, so yeah, this is really
perfect movie. This is National Treasure for relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go.
So you mentioned how they'd write letters back and forth for a while, and then one person might have to travel like a few hundred or 1,000 miles. What about over time as transportation developed and came into play? Like, how did that actually change the course of dating throughout history?
Right, hugely, because railroads were transformative to every aspect of American life, but in particular their dating life, right? Because it used to be that you could only think of marrying the boy or girl who lived in your geographical area, right? In your village, maybe the next town if you were feeling really adventurous, possibly the big city if that's where you were moving. But the building of the railroads in the 1860s meant that suddenly you could answer personal ads from people in California or Kansas or Washington State or Texas from your, tenement building in New York City, right? And that is completely transformative. Well, it just opens a whole new pool of people to marry. Now, again, you guys will know this better than I do. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to suddenly have so much choice, I think is up for debate.
think it's a bad thing.
It's definitely a bad thing.
Yeah.
I kind of think maybe it's a bad
paradox
thing.
of choice is so rough. It's
exactly. If suddenly you can marry anyone in the whole country, that's tricky. Whereas if you're restricted to whoever lives in your town, well, you work with that.
Meanwhile, my head is racing with the names of every guy that I grew up with. And I'm like, well, who would I have ended up with? Like this guy from science class or this person who was on my bus because he lived closer.
There you go. And you know what? Then you wouldn't expect them to be perfect. Which isn't to saying you're settling. It's just to say, and it's not to say you've lowered your standards. It's just, you wouldn't expect them to be perfect because they're the guy in the science class. So you've always known they're their flaws, but also what's funny about them. And so when they're make a kind of a dick move, they're like, oh, well, yeah, he was like that since he was 10, who cares? Whereas if you're meeting someone new for the first time, you have a different set of criteria, and that can be kind of destructive, right?
Yeah.
Well, don't look so depressed. Ilana, I've depressed you. Don't be depressed.
I'm like, I need to go build a time machine now.
How often, to your knowledge, just how often would people take out these ads and how long would they run for? Is it a daily thing or it's kind of like when you delete Hinge or delete Tinder, then you go back on it or you delete your profile? What's the equivalent of that? And
right. So they'd run daily or weekly I'd often find them for about 3 or 6 months at a time. Or sometimes they'd be a one-off. It actually varied enormously, again, depending on whether the ad was in, say, the New York Times or in the, South Carolina Gazette, or also, depending on the time period. So whether it was during the Civil War or whether it was, much, much later during World War II. So, that changes quite a lot over time.
Did you have to have some disposable income or was this free?
So in the beginning, you had to pay for the ads. And so you had to be of a certain sort. Again, it means, you are narrowing down who is advertising. What is fascinating to watch is with the 19th century and industrialization and population growth in all the big American cities, as farm workers flood to the cities and farm girls, factory workers, you get the democratization of these personal ads. And so for the first time, you see factory worker looking for a wife or farm girl looking for a husband. And that totally changes the game because you no longer have to be fancy to do it. What it did mean is that then loads of people freaked out about it because newspaper columnists suddenly decided personal ads were the devil's work because it meant that people from different social classes could meet and get married and have kids. And oh my God, what was going to be the result? It was going to be the moral collapse of America. Oh, so you see this kind of moral freak out in the second half of the 19th century for that reason.
Amazing.
This is so fascinating. All of it. My head is spinning.
Oh,
it really is. I love this.
So here's a question for you. Let's fast forward now almost 100 to 200 years into the future. Okay. And you are still alive, is immortal.
Great.
And
we're all here.
You want to write a book on the new history of the personal ad and dating culture and, sort of matrimony. How would you describe, knowing now that you have this 1,000-year knowledge of it, what's happening today?
So I would say when you talk about today, the thing is you can't escape the impact of the pandemic. And while we don't know how that is going to change things long term, don't you wonder whereby it might take us back to a dating culture where we are looking at a smaller pool of people, where we do travel less, where we are less likely to get on a plane from LA to New York, whereby the people who live on our block or in our town perhaps take on a new appeal. And again, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, who can judge? But I do wonder if the pandemic does go some way to taking us back, not hundreds of years back, but even to the 1950s, whereby you were not just going to jump on a plane because of somebody you'd met on Hinge, right? So that is what I am interested in terms of dating during the pandemic and what comes after. I wonder if there will be a long-term effect. There may not be. But these things are often cyclical, right? And it seems to me, having had these decades of, jumping on a plane to LA to meet some guy we met on a dating app, I wonder if in the next few decades that won't be so common and we will recalibrate, where we're looking for people and how we date in that respect.
I'm laughing as you say all this because I have gone to from New York to LA for like multiple different guys. Like I've dated multiple people, me in New York, them in LA. Okay, so we are so excited because Seeing Other People officially has its first podcast sponsor. Woo! We are stoked to be teaming up with Mindset Wellness CBD. They have a variety of awesome CBD products ranging from gummies to drops to honey sticks and more. And they also have different products for different mindsets, which is really cool. So if you're looking to feel happy or calm or restful or focused and even more, there is something for you. And you can get your mindset at mindsetwellnesscbd.com. And if you use code Seeing Other People, you'll get 10% off and free shipping because we want you to feel happy too.
Yeah, and these things are actually legitimately, I mean, we said we have to try them first. We want to work with you too, but they're amazing. And this couple, who we're going to be interviewing, John and Renee, they're going to have their own episode. They've been married and they work together, and it's really impressive. And so we're supporting a family-run business and successful relationship. So basically what we're saying is if you eat these gummies, you're going to be happily married and have a successful business relationship with somebody.
And of course, they are all gluten-free, vegan, organic, and non-GMO, and they taste really good. So have we convinced you yet? I think I'm convinced. I already took my happy gummies just now. So that's maybe why I'm like going off because I'm so happy. But
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Mindset Wellness CBD. Yeah. I've seen some things going around online that people are like breaking up with people because they found someone who's vaccinated and they're like, it's just not worth the risk.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Wait. They're breaking up with people because they found someone who's...
Maybe not breaking up like a relationship, but if they were like hooking up with someone, seeing someone, they're sending that like anti-ghosting text, that ACT text that we always talk about, where it's like, hey, I've really like taking out with you, but I met someone who's vaccinated, and that's just a lot more safe and a better situation. So
you'd rather go out with someone who is vaccinated than not vaccinated. That is funny. And on like day one of the pandemic back in like March, my brother, who's a novelist, he said, what's going to happen is there's going to be two stratas of society this time in a year, those who have the vaccine passport and those who don't. And it's going to be like the new social divide. And I was like, and I'm like, oh my God, he's a genius. He saw into the future.
Wait, when you have the vaccine though, and this is not a health podcast, but I think you're still contagious. I don't know.
You can still pass it on. Yes, but
your friend is not making a smart decision.
But this isn't my friend. I've just seen this a few times online. But imagine if I have the vaccine and you don't, and I meet Francesca who has the vaccine, I'm going to want to be with Francesca, not you.
Right. Oh, I see. This person was seeking other people who are vaccinated.
Again, I don't know. I don't know.
It's an equal choice.
It's an equal choice.
Choice
that makes
between
sense.
Somebody who's vaccinated and someone who's not. Fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. So you mentioned that your brother's a writer, and listeners, we are going to be lending the expertise of Francesca to answer your questions that we have coming up. But I do want to quickly get into you and your writing process when you sit down and write a book. I am a writer as well. Alana writes some of our hit tweets. I mean, that's a big deal.
I write in 140, well now 280 characters.
They do very well. Tell us, I guess, what is your writing process, and then what drew you to this subject matter? Let's start there.
So I've always loved history. That's always kind of been my thing. And particularly social history and the history of little things that can then tell us so much about the world. What really gets me excited actually is realizing I'm the world's expert in something, anything, even if it's like that teaspoon or this chair.
Yes.
The idea that I know more about it than anything else is really thrilling to me. So my first book was about the history of the pineapple, which people think is a joke with a punchline. It's not a joke with a punchline. It's a real thing. So I'm the world's expert on the history of the pineapple. I spent 10 years on this.
Oh my God.
And it's like fun because I know about this weird thing and no one else does. And so I've always researched a history of stupid stuff.
I love that. I want to know everything about the pineapple now.
Well, you can buy her book.
You'll have to start a fruits podcast, Alana, and I can tell you all about it.
Amazing.
Can you give us a quick pineapple, like just one fact about the pineapple that maybe our listeners don't know?
Oh, of course. I thought you'd never ask. So in the 18th century, one pineapple cost the equivalent of about $100,000. They were like the Prada handbag of their day. They were a huge status symbol.
Shut up.
You would take them to parties under your arm to show how rich you were. You wouldn't eat them because who would eat like such a status symbol? That would be ridiculous. You'd take them to parties until they began to rot. They symbolize, look how rich and fancy I am.
Is that why pineapples are kind of in art and culture as like a flourish? It's like is kind of, oh my God.
Holy shit.
People think it's a symbol of hospitality because that was kind of a myth that colonial Williamsburg spread in the 1930s. They're a symbol of the opposite of hospitality. They're a symbol of like, I am so much richer than you, don't even come near. So George Washington would serve them at dinner. So with Thomas Jefferson, they would serve them to their dinner guests as a way of asserting their status.
We are going to need to do something with this. Okay, so now describe to me your writing process. You sit down in the study and what hours of the day are you writing and what apps are you using?
Oh, well, because I'm a historian, I do all the research first. So that normally takes about 3 years per book. Initially, that meant a lot of going to the library. In the last 5 years, so much historical material has been digitized that often I can do it from home. And then there's a few months of collating the research and trying to figure out what my argument is, which mainly means a lot of going like this, because there's just like bits of paper everywhere and chaos. And then the actual writing for me as a historian is kind of the smallest part of it. It normally takes a year or two. I need to collate the material, put it in a structure and figure out what my argument is, and then write and write and write. I'm a big believer in that the blank page is the devil. It's so much better to write something than nothing. So I write like a really awful first draft that's just like, blah. Yeah. And then I go back and edit and edit and edit.
And just because I'm a nerd about the particulars, are you writing like 9 to 9 a.m. or what are the hours? And then are you using like pages?
So I write in Word, Microsoft Word. I use Evernote for my filing.
Love Evernote.
I write every day from 10 till 3 because I have 3 kids and then I have to pick them up from school. My top tip is to have very low domestic standards because otherwise there's no time to write because you're too busy cleaning up breakfast and making your bed. You have to not bother with any of that or you don't have any time. That's really my only writing tip.
Very impressive. I love that's selfish of just wanting to pick your mind there on your writing process. But that
I think the weird thing is it helps to have less time. It's kind of a cliche, but it's like the more, busyness expands to fill the time you have. So if you have all day, you take all day. If you only have 5 hours, you get it done. And that is definitely true. So even if you have to artificially like make up an appointment so that you have to get it all done really quickly, I find that's definitely helpful. Yeah. I also work in the evenings a lot. Other people find that weird, but I work in the evenings a lot and it suits me and my husband who is used to it. So.
Jonah's a morning writer. He has 3 hours blocked off every morning.
But then I do have those nights I know you're talking about. Sometimes you're just reading and you're like, it's 9 p.m. But wait a second, this is just kind of flowing out. And now I'm like, the scary part is I could do this all night. And I actually really appreciate the advice because I'm one of those people who I give myself all day to do something where it's like my best work always comes from when I'm sort of not rushing, but like I have to get it done.
So I always get my best work done on like a Saturday night. It's when I'm not supposed to be working. And if it's like a Monday morning, I can't get anything done. There's kind of the rebel in me. But when I don't feel like I have to work, that's when I get the most done, like a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, or when I just kind of like sneak to my desk.
I started doing something recently because I'm freelancing. I have the podcast. I have like a ton of different projects that I'm working on. And sometimes like by like halfway through the day, my head just feels like it's going to explode. And like, there's so much to do. Like there's never a shortage of work. There's always so much more that can be done. But I don't sleep well. And I've been waking up in the middle of the night, usually like once a night. at least. And I used to sometimes get so frustrated, like I can't fall back asleep. I'm awake and this sucks and I want to fall back asleep, but I can't. And I recently started just being like, okay, like I'm awake. You know what? This is beautiful, uninterrupted time to get shit done. And so I find myself like doing my best work from like 3 to 5 a.m. or 4 to 6 a.m. And it's just, it's amazing.
There's a cool hashtag on Instagram that's early morning writers or early morning writing, I think. And it's all pictures of people writing like
in the middle of the night.
Like totally dark, but maybe like candles and a cup of coffee and, you know, no one disturbing them and them getting, say, 2 hours done from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. That would never work for me because I'm not a morning person, but I know for others it's great.
Yeah.
And Alana, I'm going to call you out there. You need to put your phone away. You need to put the phone.
No, I don't look at my phone. I have a clock so I can actually see without checking my phone what time it is. And I will never look at my phone in the middle of the night until I've decided, like I've given it like 20 to 30 minutes of trying to fall back asleep. I'm like, I'm awake. And then I will like pull out my phone, pull out my computer and get to work.
Copy you. Well, that's inspiring. I'm going to check out that Twitter thing. This is awesome. Now, on our agenda here, before we get to listener questions, Francesca, you were telling us that you have visual sight of a certain very special location of a certain TV show that perhaps some of our listeners have heard of called Bridgerton.
I do. So I'm recording this from my house in Bath, which is where much of Bridgerton is filmed. So, for example, I can pretty much see Lady Danbury's house out my window. It's a museum called the Holborn Museum in real life. Almost all the outdoor scenes are on the Royal Crescent or in Royal Victoria Park, which is just around the corner. So it's all been very exciting recently since Bridgerton has, become such a big deal.
What are your thoughts on Bridgerton? Is it accurate? Does it really describe what the situation was like at the time? And as someone who knows so much about this, like you are the expert, what do you think?
I think it is the world's worst written, worst acted show. And yet I enjoyed it so much and watched the whole thing in like 2 nights. It was such fun and exactly what I felt like. So, I think its timing was perfect. It just, came out when we were all feeling quite bleak and needed some escapism. And so while the dialogue is ridiculous and the acting is weird and the costumes are absurd and the way they behave is totally not historically accurate, I don't care about any of that. I just found it incredibly entertaining. So I think it just has to be judged right on what it is. I think they're not trying to be historically accurate. Why should they? Who cares? That isn't... to me, that is not a criticism when people are like, oh, it's not historically accurate. They're not trying to make a documentary, right? So I loved it. But I think it doesn't have much to say about real life 18th century courtship, really. I think the one thing it does kind of get to is how important marriage was for women, how tragically important it was for women, how that was the be-all and end-all. As Jane Austen said, for women, matrimony was the be-all and end-all, and without it, what were they going to do? And that it does capture very well the kind of desperation. And of course there was desperation because these poor women, what else were they going to do in order to be financially stable? So I think it is interesting. It brings that to life in a very vivid way. Yeah.
And we loved it.
Moral
of the story, we loved it.
We all loved it.
If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it.
The action's terrible, but we loved it. I enjoyed it so much. Yeah,
and we love the Duke.
It's the pop culture lens in which that makes it modern and interesting. That's like all these dated dramas that take place in royal times. It's like, how modern can we make something that's not modern? And that's like the whole twist of it, right? Like, let's make them talk like us. Let's make them listen to music that we listen to. But that's awesome. That I guess one quick question before we get into the the listener questions. Are you a fan of the movie The Holiday? Because she works for a book publishing company, and so I wasn't sure if this is something that you were therefore a fan of.
Am I a fan of it? I've seen it a few times and it's incredibly entertaining. I mean, again, it's a bit like Bridgerton. It's totally absurd, right? But incredibly entertaining. And that has huge value. So, Yeah.
Okay. So you don't like the holiday. Good to know.
I do. What does like mean? It's entertaining.
Like,
yes.
yeah. Okay,
enjoy watching.
Yeah,
right,
enjoy watching.
All right, let's hop into these questions. So guys, if you're listening to this and you want to submit a question, definitely, Jonah, do you want to drop our little Patreon commercial?
Sure, quick Patreon commercial. Everybody, if you're listening, we are now going to answer our patrons' questions. You can sign up to our Patreon account, and you can support us with a cup of coffee, or you can support us a little bit more, get a hat, all the way up to having Alana and I invite you onto a text thread where we revamp your profile and act as your dating friends. As you're navigating the dating world, you get a sweatshirt. They're all different levels. It's all there. But the main thing is you get your question answered on the show. So go ahead, look at our Patreon. Let us know if this interests you. Let's go with the first question here.
That is so cool that people can have you as like their dating profile coach.
Yeah, we've been doing Zooms with some of these people where we're actually like figuring out what they're looking for, what their biggest pain points and struggles are, what their like dating history is, and then like taking a look at their profile, figuring out how to set it up for what they're looking for, and really like seeing it through with them along the way.
That is amazing. Have you guys immersed yourself in all the research about how, for example, if a man posts a photograph of himself with a dog, he gets like 70% more responses. And if a woman's in a yoga pose on a beach, she also gets like, it's amazing what cliches we all are, right? It's wild.
The data is crazy. And black and white photos, plugging Logan's book that's coming out. Logan Ury has a book called How to Not Die Alone. And she talks about black and white photos doing very well. Which is actually shocking because that's like a little bit of artistic, and typically people, anything that's not just as basic as hell, people are like, no, it's too crazy. It's too artsy. A black and white photo. They must be a struggling artist.
Interesting. I'm excited to read your book, Alana. And that's not an ad. That's just me saying those words.
It's our friend Logan's book. It's our friend Logan.
Logan's book.
I write in 140 characters. Don't forget. All right. Question number 1. Hey, Alana and Jonah, I think I have the opposite problem than most daters right now, in that I have too many dating prospects. Currently sitting at 7, which doesn't include new matches, women I've only communicated with on dating apps or conversations that have fizzled out. I think my problem in narrowing it down is that I really like certain aspects of each woman because they highlight different things I'm looking for in a woman, and or things that highlight different aspects of myself. For example, some are very funny and nerdy and communicate exclusively in memes and GIFs. Some are very thoughtful and well-traveled, and we can talk forever about anything in the world. Some are hilarious and easy to talk shit with. Nothing is serious yet, and I think that's for various reasons: pandemic, distance, work, etc. This is likely a personal thing I need to work out, but I was wondering if either of you have any advice on helping me to at least cut the number in half.
You're massively overthinking it. Just pick up the phone.
Well, I think his concern is that he's not concerned. He has basically a word sometimes we use over here. It's called roster. He has a list of suitors, and he's trying to narrow it down. He can't. Is that, Alana? Are you?
Yeah. And I get that, and I appreciate you giving us all of these like little looks as to the different aspects in each woman that you like. What I think is that, yes, as much as we were talking about the paradox of choice and there being so many options, like we all have these things about ourselves that we like and about the people that we interact with that we like. So in our heads, we're like, okay, we can pick out a la carte from a menu the items that we want and the like traits that we want in a person. So it's like we're looking so hard for someone that has all of those things, but that is not necessarily a recipe for success because you might not actually know what is right for you. So in terms of like long-term happiness. So what I think the best thing to do is think about like how these people make you feel, and rather than like, okay, this person's really funny or nerdy and like we can text really well. I think like, who do you genuinely want to spend time with? If you had one free day of the week, who is going to make you feel the most fulfilled? Which of those women are you going to be like, that's the one, or these are the two that I want to spend my time with? And I would say go from there. What do you think, both of you?
I agree with you. I think just as an exercise in that, it can still be difficult to pick who you want to spend that day with. So what you should do is, you obviously done a great job of recalling each qualities of each of these people. Then, as Alana said, it's how they made you feel. So you should really think to yourself by either writing down or just visualizing which one of these women made me feel happiest and most uniquely me. And then just, I would say, pursue them solely.
Yeah.
And like drop the rest for now.
And let them know, don't ghost them. Don't ghost them. Send that text. But also
I love that. It's that idea of when are you the best version of yourself, and with which of them are you the best version of yourself? That's to the point, your point about how do they make you feel. When are you the best version of yourself? And that can also be a really good predictor of like whether a relationship's going to work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let us know how it goes.
Keep us posted. Next question. I'll take this one, then Jenny can grab the third. How do I stay motivated to keep trying to date when I'm having no luck getting past the second date and with COVID making things harder?
Oh, I would say there is somebody out there for everyone, and you have to be absolutely sure of that. And I tell you why I know why. My favorite ever personal ad from the past appeared in the New York Times in 1903. And it was from, it went like this. Young man with a glass eye is looking for a young woman also with a glass eye. Da, 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 da. And it really speaks to the idea that there is somebody out there for everyone, whatever their quirks and whatever their like, you know, physical differences or whatever it is, there really is somebody out there for everyone. So I'm not saying that your listeners should necessarily look for someone with a glass eye, but I am saying that you have to like keep the faith that there's somebody out there for everyone.
Love. That's so true. Because you know that person with the glass eyes is reading that and saying, hey, there they are, found them.
Exactly.
You know, it's a metaphorical glass eye.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hang in there. It is hard right now. And it's hard even not in the pandemic. And you're not the only one struggling, but it is going to be okay. Hang in there.
Yeah, I agree with that advice. So I have nothing further to add. I'll read the third question. Virtual dating has been an absolute nightmare. I've been texting this girl for about a month now, along with some video chats during the week. Things are going well, and there's certainly some chemistry between us. In any other scenario, the logical step would be to meet in person for a real date. However, the pandemic has not allowed us to do so. Her grandma lives with her and would love to meet in person, but is hesitant in case her grandma could be compromised. Tough word. Any advice on how to further progress things if we can't meet in person? One, I'll jump right in. I think it's nice that this person's being mindful. I think you cannot risk it. They're living with the grandma. Let's not put the grandma at risk. Let's not even guilt someone into putting the grandma at risk. But if you want to progress things, you can do things emotionally. You can do things you can create ritual. You can find ritual still over video chat and text by having a conversation about taking the relationship to the next level. Oh, let's be partners. Let's be exclusive. Let's enter into a relationship. Let's create rituals. I feel like one of the things I've noticed over the pandemic is human beings in general finding the way to create rituals in the new world of like, whether that's dinner at the table on Sunday night and dressing up fancy in your house, or doing American Idol on Zoom. Like we just translate the ritual into like a new way. And I think you can change and you can create whatever fantasy real world connection you want.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have found success doing things like having like a one date night a week type of thing. Like let's pick like Thursday nights, we'll do a virtual date night, or, hey, like next time we video chat, let's make it seem like more of a date. Since I can't take you out on a real date, let's both cook the same meal together, or let's watch this movie, or let's read this book together and discuss it along the way. So I think there are definitely things you can mimic that you would be doing in real life with this person, but even though you can't meet. And again, like Francesca said, there were people who had to write letters back and forth to each other for months and months, and then finally meet in person. And hang in there. Hopefully the end is near. Hopefully you will be able to meet. But if you guys are going to have that emotional connection, there are definitely ways that you can figure it out virtually.
Right. I was just going to say, for hundreds of years, people have been forced to create a emotional intimacy before they were able to create a physical intimacy. And there can be huge value in that if you're looking for a long-term relationship. You can find advantages in that. That's how it's worked in dating for hundreds of years. And so, if the pandemic is taking us back to some elements of that, that doesn't have to be such a bad thing always.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Agree. Well, those are our listener questions. Francesca, where can people find you? Where can they get the book?
Oh, they can find my book, Matrimony Inc. When you order it, probably won't have all the Post-it notes, but anyway.
Oh, I want the Post-it notes. Those are the best part.
Send you those. I know. You can find that in all good bookshops or online. It just came out a couple of months ago, and it will be the world's best Valentine's Day present, right, for people?
Great Valentine's gift.
And that's where you can find most of my work. Yes.
Amazing.
Perfect. Well, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for hanging out with us on the show.
It's been so fun. I've loved it. Thank you for your interest. And really, my favorite bit of my work as a historian is talking about the comparison between the past and the present. So to do this with you has been really super fun for me as well.
Well, it's been such a treat.
And maybe in 30 years, we'll hop back on here and we'll see where we're at with stuff.
Let's do it.
Last question. Where can I find your pineapple book?
Also on online or anywhere. It's called The Pineapple.
The Pineapple,
and
got it.
It really, I say so myself, it's a weird but kind of fascinating book.
Amazing. If anyone listening wants to start a book club for The Pineapple, let me know. Hit me up.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next Tuesday.